Excel is such a large topic that you can't learn everything in one go. So if you know how to learn, then that will definitely aid you on your journey. So a little bit about me, just quickly. I've been teaching Excel for probably 5 years. I've been using it for maybe 15, professionally, personally. A lot of my learning has come just from online resources. I'm not saying that a course is the only way. The best way to learn is just by doing and by trying things. That's how I've been doing it. And I decided to give that knowledge to the community, whether for free or for pay, depends what you want. So that's my credentials, I suppose. I work with Excel and I'm a programmer as well, besides for that. So as mentioned, it won't be a full course. You're not going to come out of here knowing Excel proficiently, but you will learn a few important things. So the first thing that people ask me when they were signing up is it Excel or is it Google Sheets? And the real answer is that it's a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet is a common technology between those two things, the same way that Microsoft Word and Google Docs are both there to write documents. So Google Sheets and Excel are just there to use spreadsheets. So whether you see the one word or the other, for about 98% of usages, or maybe for you guys, if you're at the beginning of your journey, then basically everything's going to be exactly the same, with maybe a small few different buttons here or there, but the functionality and what we're going to learn conceptually is going to be the same. And I interchange between them personally or at work. Either way, I use Excel or Sheets. There's not really any difference for general purposes. So don't get stuck on the lingo. All right. So spreadsheet users are very, very many. As I already said, it's a very widely used business software. Here is just a list of maybe 40 types of jobs that use them. If you see yourself here, that's great. And if you don't, then you're somewhere here underneath the dots. Everyone uses it in some form or other. And even if you're not one of these things, it could be in your personal life that you're moving home and you want to track, what the cost of moving a home. And that might be a great usage for Excel. As opposed to in notes, you can actually use Excel to calculate things. So sometimes Excel is even overused more than it should be. I would say that it's the second best tool for everything sometimes, but it's great for a lot of things. And as you see here, the users are very, very many. So this applies basically to everyone who's in any sort of computer-based job. You'll be using Excel at some point or other. That's the likelihood. So let's get into the actual content, because we've got about an hour and there'll be some time for some questions. So let's get cracking. Okay, here's the outline for today's webinar. We're going to first go over how to structure data. And this is one of the most fundamental things in all of Excel, because it will allow you to.
Uh-oh.
You're on mute.
Okay, so
Sorry, we lost you there for a second. Yeah.
Here's the outline of today's course. We're going to be going over, first of all, structuring how to get your data structured in the right way so that it allows you to unleash Excel's potential. If you use Excel as like a notepad or as a scratch pad, it's not going to work properly. There is a certain structure that is typically used for most of the applications that you're going to want to use Excel for, and that will allow you to then use any function that you want with lots of ease. If you do things in a different way, it's going to make things a little bit harder. So we're going to go over that. We're going to then talk about how functions work. Functions are the magic toolboxes that Excel gives you to do things, and there's a certain anatomy and fundamental concept of how to understand a function. Most of what you're going to learn throughout your career or journey in Excel is going to be different functions. It's sort of like different tools. So over the course of your work, different problems that you encounter will require different functions to solve them. And there's no way to learn all the functions in one go. But if you understand the essentials and the anatomy of a function, then you can learn them on your own. And I'm going to show you how to learn them on your own today. We will have two examples of functions. One of them is sum, and one of them is if. These capital letters here, those are the names of the functions. If you've used Excel before, these are quite beginner/intermediate functions. They're just there to show you a few examples and to consolidate the knowledge that we learned in the essentials. And then we'll go over something which I think is very important for anyone using data in Excel, is sorting and filtering. So as you can see here, this is not going to take you to a power level of Excel. It's just going to give you 5 very important things that will help you on your way and allow you to be comfortable to learn anything in Excel pretty much, which is then going to aid your knowledge and confidence and experience, and you'll be able to use it for whatever you want, whether at work or at home. So first of all, we have how to structure your data. So in Excel, if you haven't seen it, it looks a bit like this. on the side here, that it's a grid, and we have rows and columns. Rows go horizontally, as you can see, there's green here. So 1, 2, 3, these are rows, they're numbered. And a row, the way that you should put data into a row is that you should think about that a row represents a thing or an event that happened, a record of something. So for example, a sale made by your business, that data should be put into a single row. Now, the other thing, as opposed to a row, is a column, which goes vertically. Those are A, B, C, D. As you can see here, the green, this is a column. So a column is meant to contain a category of information about things that happened. For example, the names of the products you sold, or the date that you sold them, or the customer that you sold them to. Those should each go in a specific column. And columns are lettered A, B, C, and D. So once you know about rows being a thing that happened, and you know about columns being a category of information about something that happened, then it must be that a cell, which is an intersection of a row and a column, must hold one bit of information about one thing that happened. So that would be the name of one product that you sold. So if row 2 contains a certain sale and column B contains the name of the product, so in this cell here, B2, that's how you reference a cell. You say the letter of the column and then the number of the row, B2, that would contain the name of that specific sale. So in this way, every single cell represents one bit of information. And something I see often people doing wrongly is trying to put more than one bit of information into one cell. And that doesn't allow you to then use the data properly. People, are writing lists inside of a cell with commas. You can't very easily extract that data from a cell. There are ways, but they're very complicated. And for the typical standard structure of data, every cell should have one bit of information. So what we call in the data world, this is called tidy. If your data is tidy, then your rows contain things that happened, your columns contain categories of information, and therefore your cells contain one bit of information about a thing that happened. So, for example, we have here, by the way, all this slideshows and spreadsheets and recordings are going to be available after the class. I'll be sending out links, so don't worry about having to remember all this all by heart. But for the webinar, it's going to be just follow along with me as opposed to doing the stuff on your own. The demos are going to be quite minimal. Most of this class will be conceptual with some demos, but you'll be able to get the spreadsheets afterwards. So here's an example of some sales data, as we just mentioned. We can see here, this is exactly how Google Sheets looks. The rows go down in numbers 1 till 29, and obviously this goes further and down. This is just a screenshot. And the columns go A, B, C, D across like that. So this row number 2, it represents one sale. And here we have all the columns with information. We have the sales order date, sales order number, invoice date, invoice number. There's tons of bits of information that you want to know about any sale. And you can have as many as you want. Some rows could have 30, 40 columns if that's the information that you want to store. It's up to you how much data you want to store. It could be you only need 3 or 4 columns if it's a very simple thing. So in this way, we can see that, for example, F7 has the number 1,000 in there, which is the customer number of this specific sale. That's the customer number that we sold them to. It's like an ID. So every cell here only has one bit of information. You can see even city and state is split up into 2 different columns, because that way we can do certain calculations like, okay, let's look at all of our customers who are in Georgia or who are in Colorado. But if we had put them together, like Atlanta, Georgia, into one cell, then it becomes a bit harder to do that. So that's the idea of putting everything into every bit of information into its own column. So here's a good example. As opposed to this example, which a lot of people you might see, this is sort of a summary view or a pivot view. Basically, here we have sales or revenue added up by the year. So we've got here, each row here represents a different type of product, and each column represents a year of the sales. And then the cells are saying how much the revenue was. So that's great if you want to give a report to someone and say, okay, here's our reporting and our sales for those 5 years. But in terms of storing data, this is not how you store it. You always want to store your data separately from your reporting. So you have a raw data. It's very flat structure, as we just mentioned, the rows, columns, and cells. And then you can do calculations on that separately. So this is great as a report, but not as of how you store the data. Some people are using this cell and they're adding numbers into the cell one by one. And that's just not the way you're meant to store things. It doesn't give you very much flexibility. So this is just wrong way to store data. That's what I would say. It's called a pivot view or a summary view, because we've taken the raw data and we've summarized it by year and by product type, which is not actually in this column here, but it's product type. So this is great, again, for a report, but it's not the way we store data. So that's how you structure your data. Rows, columns, and cells. It's all you have to know. That will take you on whatever journey you want, and we'll see soon how we're going to use that in some of the functions. So let's get into function essentials. So what is a function? Now, you may have heard the word formula as well. Sometimes these words get interchanged in talking about Excel. They're slightly different, but if you think of what a formula is and a function, it's okay if you want to interchange them for the purpose of this webinar, that's totally fine. Ultimately, what a function is a sort of magical box that takes some input and then it gives you a certain output. And what happens inside the function, you don't even have to know how it works. You just have to know what you have to give it and then what it gives you. So like a printer, let's say a real life printer is a function in a way. You give it some paper, you give it some ink, you give it some instructions like make 3 copies of this file, this PDF, make sure it's double-sided, black and white. You give it all those inputs and then it gives you the output, which is the printed paper. So that's great. You don't know how it works, all the circuits, all the printing, lasers, you don't care about that. The function takes care of that for you. So Excel gives you hundreds of functions that you can do certain things that you're going to want to do, calculations or lookups or things to do with dates or numbers. All sorts of things are available in Excel, and we're going to go through a couple today. But the idea of a function is that it's just a magical box that does something for you. Given some inputs, it will give you some outputs. Now, how do you actually know how to use a function? So every function has its own sort of blueprint or manual, which tells you what inputs are needed, and it tells you what the output looks like. And that's called a syntax. The syntax tells you which inputs are needed for a certain function. So when we go through the sum and if examples, we'll see exactly what a syntax looks like and how to look that up, because ultimately, if you know how to look up syntax on your own, that's how you learn new functions. The same way, if you can go on to IKEA website and you can look up user manuals, that will teach you how to build certain bits of furniture. If you can find the manual yourself and you can read it, that's great. So these syntaxes are like a manual for a function in Excel. So let's take our knowledge that we just learned about syntax and let's actually apply it in concrete to a certain example, which is the sum function. So here we go, the sum function. This is one of the first functions that you learn in Excel. What it does is it adds up a whole bunch of numbers. It could be you can add up a whole column. If it's revenue, it could be you could add up a row, you could add up a box, you could add up just this cell plus this cell plus this cell. You can add whatever you want. So this might look a bit unfamiliar to you. This is what syntax looks like. It's sort of the outline. And we're going to go through this bit by bit, but this is what the syntax looks like for the sum function. Let's break it down by first seeing this is what the documentation looks like on Google Sheets website. So if there's a link over here. If I'm going to go to this link and let's see where it takes us. So here we have the online documentation for the Google Sheets function, and it might look a bit intimidating, but we're just going to zoom in on a couple of different areas because this is going to be a great way for you to learn in general when you have a new problem to solve and you go online and you Google it and someone says, oh, use this and this function. And you're like, well, I don't know how to use that. So when you Google, if you want to find how to use it, you can come to this manual over here. So here are some sample usages. Well, first of all, there's the description, right? Returns the sum of a series of numbers and a cell. So a series just means like a list, basically. So it just and returns means that's the output. So it just gives you the sum, the total. If you have 10 plus 20 plus 30, then the sum is 60. So here's some sample usages, and we're going to go through that as well. And here you go. That's the syntax. That's what we were talking about before, which is the blueprint of the function. Sum, we have value 1 and then value 2. Again, if these brackets and dots and commas are scaring you, just pause for a second because we're going to go through this in a lot of detail. But the idea is you can come up here and you can find the documentation for any function, and you can search other functions here as well. So we'll go through as well how to find the next function as well. But going back to our slideshow, continuing on with the sum function, let's break down the syntax and actually teach you the anatomy of what you have to do to use this function and what you have to do to use any function, really. So this is an example of what you might type into Google Sheets. You would type in equals sum bracket A1, comma, A2, comma, A3, close bracket. Okay, so what's going on here? First of all, the equal sign. Whenever you're typing in some sort of function or formula into Excel, as opposed to just typing in some raw data, like if you want to type in someone's name, you just type it into a cell. But if you want to do some sort of function or formula, you have to start off with an equal sign, which tells Excel, don't treat this as raw text, but actually do it as a function. So you start off with the equal sign. Then you type in the function name, which is sum. The convention is to use capital letters, but it will still work even if you don't. I think it just keeps it nice and readable if you use capital letters, because you might have other parts of the function that you want to type in with regular case letters. So this keeps it, just gives it a nice convention. It's good to use conventions if you can. It just keeps your work tidy and neat. And if someone else is going to be using it as well, then it makes it easier. So you type in the name of the function. That's how you access a function. You just type its name in after an equal sign, and then you open curved brackets, regular brackets, you open them up, and now you're inside the function, you're giving it your inputs. Okay, then A1, A2, and A3, remember how we said before that every cell is referred to by its column and its row. So A1 is the name of a cell, A2 is the name of a cell, and A3 is also the name of a cell. They're all in column A, they're in row 1, and then row 2, and then row 3. So it's just 3 bits of information. So these are the values that we're giving to the sum function. These are the numbers that we want to actually add up. But we're not typing the numbers directly into the function. We're actually telling the function, look at these cells, and whatever's in there, get those values. So it's a smarter way of typing it, so that whatever's in the cells, that's what's going to be fed into the function. And if you change the number in the cell, that's fine. That will still be fed into the function. Now, the comma in between each of these values is just that's how you separate different values. When you give inputs to a function, they need to be comma separated. So in this way, we have one value we give to the function, then a comma, then a second value, and then a comma, and then a third value. Having a space after the comma, that's English convention. You don't have to do it in Google Sheets. Again, it's just good for readability, but you don't have to. It will work just fine without the spaces. But the commas are necessary to move from the first input, second input, third input. And then you close the brackets to end the function. So you might be asking yourself, if you're a bit of an eagle-eyed reader, that here I entered in 3 values, but in the syntax before, there only had a value 1 and value 2. So how does that work? So something to know about syntax is that when you see this ... over here, that means that it's open-ended. And if you go onto the back into the documentation, you can see that you can actually have many, many values. So you can have as many as you like. That way I can say, give me the sum of this and this and this and this and this and this and this, and it will give you the sum of all of them. Most commonly, you're going to be just summing up like one column, and you can put an entire column inside of value 1 if you wanted to. But occasionally you can also use more. The square brackets around this just indicates to you in the syntax that it's optional, because you are allowed to not give it a second value. You can just give it one value if you want. So these are kind of things that you'll get more comfortable with when you're reading more and more syntaxes. It is a bit to take in, but I really believe in the fundamentals here, because I know a lot of people who use Excel. They can use the functions that they know in their job, but they can't expand their learning at all. So it's almost like learning a new language a little bit. If you understand some of the grammatical rules, then you can learn new words, use new phrases, and you'll really have the freedom to get a lot better, and you'll scale up. It's a little bit harder in the beginning, but then once you start using things more and more, it will become second nature to you. So anyway, back to this example, we're going to give 3 values to the function, and then we're going to close the brackets. And that is it. Then you hit enter, and that's the end of entering in the function. And then in whichever cell that you do this, the answer will be given in there. So another version of how you can do this, instead of typing in 3 values, A1, A2, and A3, is to just put them into one value, A1, and then use this colon, which means until. So if we go down here and we read what it says here, it's now a range of values. So a range just means a continuous list. So that could be half a column, a whole column, it could be 3 cells. it could be this way, it could be a box. It has to just be continuous. It can't, if you want to do something over here and then over here and then over here, they have to be separate values. But you could give a range. And most commonly, if you want to add up a column, you will give it a range saying from A1 until A1000, and that will add up, 1,000 rows together. So that's what the column does. And if you notice, there's no brackets here because this whole thing is technically value 1. It's just the first value, and because you're allowed to give a range as a value. So that's these two things are going to give you the same answer, but this is a little bit of an easier way to type it. So if we then take our graphic from before where we had inputs and outputs, so the inputs to the function are A1 until A3, which let's just say they contain the numbers, A1 contains 9, A2 contains 2, and then A3 contains 6. You put that into this magical sum function, and it spits out for you 17. So let's actually do an example of this on the spreadsheet itself, so we can take our knowledge into some real life work. So let's zoom in a little bit here. You can see here A1, right? If you see I'm inside A1, you can see in the corner here also, if you can't figure it out, that it's A1, and then A2, and then A3. So I've already typed these numbers in, but if you wanted me to do it again, you can just go 9, enter, 2, enter, 6, enter. Okay, so that's typing in numbers. And then we can do the function wherever we want. We can do it over here, here, here. Doesn't matter, we're just presenting. I'm not showing you how to, where to structure this. But if let's say we'll do it right over here underneath A4. So let's just do what we did before. We do the equal sign, and then we type in the name of the function, which is sum. As you're typing in Google Sheets, it gives you this autocomplete. You can see even what the function does, some helpful tips. If you press it, it will open the brackets for you, or you can just open the brackets yourself. And now you can even see hovering underneath is the syntax that we talked about. So it's sort of giving it to you on a platter in case you forgot what the syntax is. And over time, you will learn your own functions, what the syntax is. So let's type in, let's try it out with giving it first A1 and then a comma. So we just literally type in A1 and then comma. And you see now how the hovering has gone to value 2 because we've moved to the second value because we did a comma. And now I'm going to type in A2 and then another comma. And I'm still there because this includes the 3 dots. So that's basically saying value 2 and onwards. And then I do A3 and then I close the brackets, and you can already see the answer is hovering there. But if I click enter, now it gives me 17. So if you click on this cell, it just says 17. But if you go to the formula bar up here, you can see, or if you double click into the cell, you can see what's being typed in behind the scenes. Whereas 9, 2, and 6 are just raw data. 17 is actually the result of the formula.
But there's a quick sum tool. You don't have to do this whole thing. If you write this, you could just highlight those and hit sum, and it will do it automatically, right?
I'm just trying to teach the core of how these things work. There are some shortcuts definitely for that kind of thing, but it's good to know in general, that this is, just an example of how to use the function syntax. So the other way to do it would be if you go, instead of doing the commas, you could do equals sum, and then you could do A1 until using the column, and then A3. And you can see how it's highlighting them ready, and then close the bracket, and it's the same answer. We just gave the range in all inside value 1 as opposed to doing comma, which is the most common way to do it. So that's a very simple example. And sum is one of the most simple functions you're ever going to use. It just literally just takes numbers together. You could also just highlight, and then you can see the answer down there. There's many different ways, and summing is a very common thing. If you have expenses, if you have revenues, if you have any other numbers you want to add up, that's a very simple way to do it. So that's just giving you, not because sum is going to change your life, but more because it's a good practical application of how to use a function now that you know that it's an input with some magic and then some output. Let's now take things to a little more complicated level by going to the if function. So let's see how that works. The if function, you can see the syntax already is a bit longer and has a bit more, jargon. So we're going to take this step by step. First of all, what does the if function do? It allows you to use logic to decide whether to do a certain operation this way or that way. If I tell you, go to the grocery store. If they have apples, get me apples. If they don't have apples, get me oranges, right? That I've just given you sort of an if statement. It branches that way or it branches that way. So I'm giving you both instructions in advance, and then you come home and you say, okay, there were apples, so I bought apples. Or you say there were not apples, so I bought oranges. That's the core concept of what an if function does. So let's go through the syntax bit by bit. First of all, there's a logical expression. What this means is it's the test that you want to say, are there apples in the grocery store? It's the question. It's something which could be true or false, or yes or no. That's what you have to enter into the first part of the if function. Then the second part of the if function is saying, what should I do? What should the computer do if the answer to this logical expression is true? So what value should be done, either a value or another function or operation? What should you do if the expression is true? So you give that, I said, if there are apples, then buy me 5 apples. And then you also have to give the value if false, meaning what if this expression comes out to not true? What if it's false? Then get me oranges. If there's no apples, get me oranges. So you give all 3 pieces in advance. You say what your condition is, you say what to do if the condition comes out good, and then what to do if the condition comes out bad. That way the computer knows what to do in advance. And if the answer to this is true, then this part will get executed and the false part will get ignored. And if the logical expression is false or no, then the true part will be ignored and the false part will be executed. So let's get into it. Again, we can see a screenshot here of the syntax. If you go online to the documentation, then we can see again, it returns one value if logical expression is true and another value if it's false. And we have some sample usages. And again, we have the syntax here. So you can literally read what each of these pieces of syntax does. So logical expression is an expression, which just means like some logic or reference to a cell, right? If you give it a certain cell, which contains an expression, and it represents a logical value. So often these documentations are a little bit wordy. They have a little bit like, not to be a pun, but they have a lot of like, technical wording. So you'll learn these words as you go along, but ultimately a logical value just means true or false. Logic is all about, things being true or not or false. So you want to say, is this number greater than 1,000? So if it is, then that's true. If it's not, then it's false. And there's also all sorts of different conditions that you can give that end up as true or false. Is this cell empty or is this cell not empty? Or does this cell contain the word 5? Or does it contain the word yes? Or you can do anything you want. You're just basically asking a question of reality. Is this true or false? Then you give the instruction what to do if it comes out the true. And then you give the instruction of what happens if it's false. So here's the documentation. It looks very similar to the sum, right? You can always just Google this if you want. You can go like if syntax Google Sheets and you'll find the answer. Let's see, it looks like if syntax Google Sheets. And then it's basically right there. Google, go to the one that has Google in it and you go right there and you're back where you were. So that's how you find the answers to these things. So let's go back and break down the syntax bit by bit as we did for the sum function, and then we're going to go do a live demo of how that function works. So here's an example. We say equals if A1 greater than or equal to 1,000, then yes, otherwise no. So let's first discuss what we're trying to do before we get into the syntax. So there's 3 things going on here. The first piece is A1 is greater than or equal to 1,000. So if you haven't encountered before, this symbol means greater than. This obviously means equal to. So together it means greater than or equal to. And the other side, which will be a symbol like this, means less than. So the first question is, does A1, meaning does whatever number that exists inside cell A1, is it greater than or equal to 1,000, right? That's the English. Is the value of A1 greater than or equal to 1,000? That's the question. Then this is the part that we want the computer to do if the answer to this question is yeah, it is true. What we want to do is we want to say that the result should be yes. And we have the quotation marks here because what that means is it tells the computer to just put the text in there. When you deal with text inside of a function or a formula, you have to wrap it up in quotation marks. That tells the function, just put the text there as it is. So the cell should return the value yes if this is true. But if it's not, let's say A1 is like only 400, then we should put the text no. And this is a very basic example, just to show you, as for demonstration purposes, just to put the word no in there, right? As we said here, if result is no, if A1 is less than 1,000. So let's see some examples. if A1, and we're going to use our same image again of an input and a function and an output. If A1 contains the number 750, then the result's going to be no, because first question gets asked, is A1 greater than 1,000, right? Is 750 greater than 1,000 or equal to? No, it's not. So we skip over the yes, and we just put in the cell no. If it says, if A1, however, is 1,250, then the question comes out to true, in which case we execute this part, which is yes. So the answer will be yes in the cell. And if A1 equals exactly 1,000, then because we said greater than or equal to, so the answer is again going to be true, and therefore it will be yes. So here are a few different options of what could come out. So let's do this on the spreadsheet itself. Let's go to the if function, the if tab. So we have A1, cell A1. I've already typed in the number 1,000. Let's go to B1 and type in this if function. So again, we always have to do our equal sign and the name of the function, open the brackets, and we have the syntax here hovering again, just to remind us, okay, so logical expression, what do we want to actually ask of the spreadsheet? We want to say A1, and remember, we always point to the cell. We don't just type in the number. The reason for that is because we want to be able to change what's in the cell after we have already typed in the function, as you'll see. So is A1 greater than or equal to 1,000? That's our test. And we hit comma, because we want to go to the next part of the function, the next import. And now we tell the computer, what do we do if it's true? If A1 is greater than or equal to 1,000, type in yes. But you don't do it like this. You have to do it wrapped up in quotation marks. So you do it like this. You'll see it comes out green, which is the convention of color for text. So now it's green, and that's the answer if it's true. Then you do a comma. And what happens if it's not true? We have to give the computer both instructions. We'll do no. But again, we'll type it inside quotation marks. So we'll do it like this, no. Okay. Now we've given it the three parts. Let's close the bracket and hit enter and see what the answer is. So the answer currently is yes, as we expect, because now it is 1,000. So this should be yes. And now if I change this number to 750, now it comes up to no. So you see, I haven't touched the function at all. I've just changed the cell. And that's because we pointed this function to the cell. We looked at A1, and now whatever happens here, this answer is gonna update by itself. And that's the beauty of having functions that you type in advance, is that the inputs to them might change, but you don't have to change anything inside the function itself. And if this becomes 1,250, then it goes back to yes. Again, this is a trivial example that may not be that useful for you, but another good example might be if someone has to earn over a certain amount of sales to get a certain commission, then you could first check, did this person's sales, were they greater than a certain number? And if they do, then there could be some commission. So I'm going to do a quick live demo here of that. If this gets a bit over your head, that's totally fine. This is just for those who are getting it and want to just see a bit more of a live example. Let's say the commission has, the sale has to be over $5,000 to get commission. And if the person does get over that amount, then they'll get, let's say, a 10% commission on what they get. So let's just give an example. And again, this is not following the structure that we said before. This is just a bit of a scrapbook, just for demonstration purposes. Let's say that the person's sale was $10,000. So we know, me and you, that this is going to meet the condition, right? This is fine because it went over 5,000. So this person should get 10%. But we want the computer to do this because what if there's, thousands of sales going all the way down, down, down? I don't want to have to ask the question every time. The whole point of having functions is that the computer can do it all for you in a very quick time. So let's do the function over here. Let's just say equals if logical expression. So if the sale price that the salesperson made, which is in D2, right over here, D2, if it's greater than 5,000, which is in A2, again, you don't type the numbers, you type in whatever the cell, as long as you want to reference the cell that can change. Then if it's true, then this person should get $10,000 times 10%. So we say, then the value that should be written here, instead of just saying yes or no, we actually going to calculate the number. We're going to say D2. And the way you do times by is with this star symbol, which is shift 8. And then we say times 10%, which is in B2. So everywhere we're just referring to different cells with instructions in them. So if the 10,000 is over the threshold, then he should get 10% of it. But if it's not true, if he didn't make it a number, then he just gets 0 commission. So you can just type in 0 directly. Close your bracket. And that's your answer. He gets $1,000 because that's 10% of 10,000. If let's say he made $4,000 on the sale, then the commission now goes to zero. So here we have a function which responds to these numbers. What if the commission threshold changed? What if the threshold only actually was 3,000? Change the threshold, and now he gets 400. Oh, what if the percentage of the commission changed? If this becomes 20%, great. So you can play around with all the numbers in the cells, and the formula, which is over here, didn't have to change at all, and it always gives you the answer. So that's maybe a little bit more of an advanced example of using if. But ultimately, we gave it a question, which is like the expression. We gave it an instruction of what to do if it's true, and then an instruction what to do if it's false, following the syntax as Google Sheets tells you. And if you even click this little arrow, you can expand the details, and you can even read the documentation right in here as you're typing, which is very useful and something that I use if I forget what's going on while I'm typing. So that is the if function. And now we've learned two examples of how to use syntax and how to apply a function on a spreadsheet. Now let's look at the last part of the webinar, which is sorting and filtering. These are not functional things. We're not going to use functions now, but we're going to be using features of the spreadsheet, which you might come across all the time to do with sorting and filtering. So first we'll go with sorting. Sorting essentially means if you have a column which is full of text, things like words, names, customers' names, states, locations, things like that, then you want to sort those either A to Z or Z to A. And this is not, you don't have to do this, but if you wanted to, then you would sort it A to Z or Z to A. If it's a column of numbers or dates, things like that, then it's 0 to 9 or 9 to 0. Either way, it's called ascending or descending. So A to Z is ascending, meaning as you go down, you're getting higher and higher and higher. You're going A, B, C, D, E. Or with numbers, you're going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Or the other way around is descending, which means as you go down, the numbers are going down with you, or the letters are going down with you. That's the idea of sorting. And I'm sure you know about this from just general life, that's what sorting means. When you sort, what actually happens is that every row, because we said every row is a discrete event, something that happened, or it's a thing, it's a piece of information, it's a whole set of information. So that row has to stay together. You can't sort and then the row gets broken up, right? The row is going to move wherever it goes, but it's going to stay intact. So what you'll typically do is you'll pick one column, let's say customer ID, and you'll sort by that column. So now all the rows get shuffled around so that the customer ID is now sorted 0 to 9 or A to Z. Or you'll sort based on location, let's say. So then you'll see all your states in order, but the rows are always staying together because you can't shuffle bits and pieces of a one row because then you're changing the fact of what happened. Every row has to stay together. That's what happens when you sort. So a good usage of sorting is to easily find the maximum or minimum value, whether that's the first person, in a class list of students. If you sort by the last name, then you'll be able to see the first person is going to have the last name, starting with A or B, and the last guy might start with Z. So you'll be able to see an alphabetical list. Or if you're doing revenue, you want to see what was the highest sale price we got this year. So you can sort it by descending order from 9 to 0, and then your revenue is now sorted, and you can see the rows ordered by that column. That's one use. That's the most typical use, is just to sort. The other potential use of sorting is to group things together. So if you wanted to see all the Georgia location sales together, you could sort by the state column. And then because sorting makes things go, all the A's, then all the B's, all the C's. So you'll be able to see groups, you'll see, okay, here's all of our sales, Alabama, then maybe Arkansas, stuff like that. And you get to Georgia eventually, and you'll be able to see groups of things. So sorting is great for seeing groups of things as well. So just as a reminder, people get confused with the lingo of ascending versus descending. And if you want to remember which is which, you always ask yourself, so you're going to go down the spreadsheet bit by bit. Are the numbers getting bigger? If they are, then they're ascending. Or are they getting smaller, which is descending? Because you always have to look down the spreadsheet. That's why it can be confusing, because you're checking the numbers bit by bit as you go down. If the numbers get bigger as you go down, it's ascending. If they get smaller, it's descending. But either way, on the spreadsheet itself, as I'll show you, it just gives you the A to Z or Z to A. So you don't even have to remember the lingo, but it's good to know. So let's go back to our spreadsheet over here, to the data tab. These are called tabs, by the way. They're just multiple grids within one spreadsheet. So let's zoom out a bit, and we'll look at our data. This is the data we had in a screenshot before. This is our sales data of a bike shop. we have a lot of columns here, about 20 columns or so, all different bits of information. So if we wanted to say sort by the location, that's what we said before, what you have to first do is you go to that column, you can then right click on that column, and there's a whole bunch of menu options of what to do here. You just look for the one that says sort sheet A to Z or Z to A. Let's do A to Z. And now we can see all of a sudden the rows changed around, and now you have California all grouped together. California, 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 California. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Eventually we'll get to Colorado, CO, because CA comes before CO. And then eventually we get to Georgia, right? That's what we said before, Georgia. So we can see everything is now sorted. If we want to go the other way, we can right click again on the name of the column up here. Clicking on the letter here takes the whole column. So you right click on the whole column. Now we can do Z to A. Go back to the top, right? Scroll back to the top so we can see Washington is the last state that we have alphabetically. So that could be a usage of sorting. Let's say we want to instead do sorting by date. So when we had the sales order, that's the first, that's when the customer placed the order. Let's do those by date. What's the most recent order we have? We can take this column, right click, and we have to do descending, because descending will put the highest date first, which is the most recent, right? Dates are just numbers essentially. So it's the highest one first, which this data set is already a few years ago. This data set could be updated to show more recent dates, but as you can see here, the numbers here are going 9th of January, 6th of January, they're going backwards, right? Now we have the year before, December, and then November. So we can see here that now all the rows are sorted by this date. If you wanted to do it by revenue, let's say, we could go to our revenue column, which is over here, and we could right click and sort by Z to A, again, to see the most revenue. So the most revenue we made on any single sale was 33,588, which is pretty good. If you want to know what happened in that sale, you can just read through it. So we had 12 quantity of the professional touring bike in color black, which is of the finished bikes product type. Then we can see, okay, who sold it? It was the United States East Division. Each of the items was sold for 2,799. You can see whatever bits of information you want, how much the cost was, how much the profit was. The row stays together, and it was done to this customer, Furniture City Bikes in Grand Rapids, Michigan, on this and this date. This is the invoice number. All the information is stored there already, because whoever put this data in followed very good practice of storing sales in rows, things that happened, and then bits of information in columns, right? Division, product, price, discount, and therefore each sale has all the bits of information that it needs. So that's the idea of sorting. Let's now look at the idea of filtering. So filtering is kind of similar to sorting because you're shuffling data around. But what you want to do is, instead of just ordering them from highest to lowest or lowest to highest, you want to actually only zoom in on certain bits of data specifically. You want to view specific values only. So there's two ways to do this. You can either choose directly and say, I want to see just these and these values. You can literally pick them, or I want to exclude these and these values. So that's called filtering by value. You specify what you want to see or don't want to see. The other way to filter is to filter by a condition, which means you remember how we had in our if function a condition which said, is this greater than this? So you can have a condition saying, okay, here's my threshold. I only want to see revenues that are higher than 1,000. And then anything which is above that, it will keep. Anything below that, it will not keep. So this could be easier when you have thousands of different numbers in the revenue column. You don't want to have to sit there and select each one that you want to see. You just give it a condition. Or if you want to see names, there could be thousands of names in the column, and you want to only see names that start with the letter A, you could do that as well. So that's the idea of filtering. So some examples are in our data set, only show me sales to customer, Philly bikes. And we're going to filter by values, meaning we're going to pick specifically to show these sales. Let's go and do that in an example. Let's go back to our data set. So how do you start filtering? With sorting, it was easy. You just press on a column, right click, and then you can sort. What you want to do for a filter is you have to first activate the filter in general. So you filter using columns. So what you do is you highlight the first row of the whole spreadsheet, which is clicking on this row over here, the number, it highlights the whole thing. Then you go to this button over here, which looks a bit like a funnel, and you hover over it, it says create a filter. So you click that. And now you see how there's green everywhere. The highlight, everything is highlighted in green. And each of these columns has a little filter icon next to it because you have now turned the filter on. But so far, nothing's happened. All the data is still there. You could still see it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the side here. All the data is still there. We've just activated the filter. Now, in order to choose to do the filter, we're gonna go back to our example and see what it was. It was to show sales to this customer, Philly Bikes. So we need to first find the column which contains the customer, which is customer name. Then we click into this filter for this column by pressing on this filter button. We get a little pop-out window here. And you see how it automatically gives us the option of filtering by values, because that's sort of the default. It could be the most common way of filtering. And underneath here is a little sub window with all the different unique values. So of course we have thousands of sales here, but they're only happening to 10 different clients or customers. So if we want to select just Philly Bikes, what you can do is you can either unclick everyone else, or you can press clear, which is an easy way to clear everyone out. And now I can just specifically click Philly Bikes. That's ticked now. And I hit OK. And all I'm going to see is data for Philly Bikes. So you see everyone is Philly Bikes, but nothing's being deleted. It's just filtering. It's just hiding the other ones. And you can see on the side here, all of a sudden we've jumped from row 1 to row 11 and then 33, 37. So the numbers in between those don't match our filter. So they're hidden. And on this column, you can see that that filter is now like filled in, as opposed to this icon is not filled in other columns. This one is. You can see that the filter is on and active in that specific column. And now we only see this data. And if you want, you can then copy and paste this somewhere else for some other report. It could be very useful to filter and then just extract certain things elsewhere. That's one example of filtering by value. Let's see now an example of filtering by values on a different column. So we want to this time show sales of product DXTR1000. I'm not sure what that is, but we'll use this product ID to figure that out. So let's go back to the spreadsheet. First of all, we have to turn off the filter of this column. So otherwise, if we activate multiple filters from multiple columns, then we're going to be filtering twice. We're going to be saying Philly Bikes and then zooming in onto that product. That's not what I asked for. I asked for all sales of this ID. So we have to first learn how to turn off the filter for a certain column. So you go back to the column, click on that pop-up window, and this time you can just do select all. Select all basically just means that there's no filter, right? If you see everything, then there's no filter. So now everything is now ticked, and then you can hit OK again. And now it's back to how it was. If you have, let's say, multiple columns that are filtered and you don't want to have to turn them all off manually, then you can do a shortcut by once again highlighting the top row and then just turning the filter off and then on again. So now every filter got turned off, every column, and now we turned it on again because now we still want to use it, but we wanted to get rid of all the filtering that was done previously. That's a bit of a shortcut. And let's go to our example. We said product DXTR1000. So let's find the right column. Let's go to the top here. So we know it's not city, not state, product number. That's what we're looking for. So let's go to the pop-up window next to product number, click on that. And we get, once again, our little filter by values dialog box here. And we can see here it's DXTR1000, but they're currently all selected. So again, we're going to just clear everything. Now, none of them are selected. If I hit OK, then we're going to see nothing, right? That's a little scary. That was just an example. But then if we go back to the filter and we choose DXTR1000, hit OK. Now we scroll back up, we can see these are all the sales made to DXTR1000. And then if you want, you can also start sorting. You can sort and filter at the same time. If I want to see them all by state, I can then right click here and go to sort sheet A to Z. So now I see only DXTR, but I see them ordered by state. That could be useful for you if you want. The opposite of this filter would be if we wanted to see everything except for DXTR1000. How would you do that? So you would first of all select everything and then uncheck that. Now it's unticked. You hit OK, and now you see everything except for that. That could be something that you want to do. So you can choose or unchoose whatever you want when you filter by values. Let's turn this filter back off. So now click select all again. Now it goes back to just a regular filter icon, which means it's not actually being active on that column. And the third example is show me sales where revenue is greater than 10,000 or equal to 10,000. And this is now filtering by condition, right? Because now I'm not telling you which numbers to give me specifically. I'm just giving you a rule. And if the rule is met, then that will show those values. So let's go to the column for revenue, which is all the way to the side. column S. Let's open this dialog box, and automatically it's giving you filter by values. And imagine we have to go into here and clear this, and then slide down to above 10,000. I'd be sitting here for days clicking. Well, not that one. You know, I'd be here forever. So that just doesn't work. So what you do is you can clear or select, doesn't matter. Point is, you can close this little filter by values. You can just collapse that, and instead open up the filter by condition. So now you get an option of what kind of condition you want. So there's all different types of conditions. It could be that based on if something is empty or not empty, or if the text contains certain letters or does not contain certain letters, or the dates. We're going to use the numbers ones over here, which is filtering using greater than or less than or equal to. These are things to do with numbers. So in the example, I wanted to do greater than or equal to $10,000. So we're going to use the greater than or equal to operator over here. Okay, so now we've chosen the condition, but now what's the value? We said, oh, it should be 10,000. So just type that in, 10,000. Now you hit OK. And now you see the filters turn on that column, and we only see numbers that are 10,000. And if you want to prove it to yourself, you can actually sort on the same column, A to Z. So now we see the lowest numbers first, and we see, oh, the lowest number here is 11,340, which is greater than 10,000, great. And on the side over here, you can eventually see some of the rows are being skipped because we've hidden them. If we look down a little bit, these are all in order, right? We get down to here, and then all of a sudden there's a huge drop off of 20 rows or 600 rows because they're all hidden, because they don't meet our criteria of being greater than that number. So that's an example of filtering using the condition. There is also a color option if you color your cells in. I didn't include it in the webinar because it's a bit of a, a separate thing if you do colors, but it's a new feature in the last couple of years that you could actually filter using colors as well. You only want to show things that are green or red if you happen to use that. I don't put that much stock in colors, but if you do, then you're free to roam with that. So to get this filter back off, again, we can just click on the remove filter icon, and then if you want to turn it back on again, you can. And now it's all back to square one, or you can even just turn it off, and now your filter is no longer active at all. So that brings us to the end of the examples of filtering. The uses of filtering would be to specifically zoom in on certain data, as we just showed. But another interesting usage of filter is to find typos or incorrect data. Now, how do you think this is going to work? So how do you find typos using filtering? So what we're going to do is we're going to use the fact that the filter pop-out window gives us the list of unique values in each column. And then we can cast our eye and see, maybe there's some errors here. Let's first turn the filter back on by highlighting the first row and going to the filter. And I already did this, I set it up for you like this. But if we go to the product type area, a column, and we click on this little pop-up window. So now we can see here the values are accessories, finished bikes, safety gear. But we have this one as well here, the finished bikes. So what's the difference? There's a typo here that it's got finished with 2 N's. And I only found this because this filter window gives me the list of unique values. So if I want to fix this, all I have to do is clear the data, clear the options, and then just select the one that's wrong, hit OK. Okay, so I see that there's 2 rows, row 11 and row 577 have this typo. And all I have to do is just come in and change it. And if there was a lot of them, then you'd be able to slide down. I'm not going to cover dragging down exactly in this little webinar, but I'll do a tiny demo. If you want to copy the value, you can just take this little arrow on the top, the bottom right corner, and just drag, and then it copies it down. Anyway, if you didn't get that, don't worry. But the idea is I just found the typos using the filter, and now I see here there are only actually now 3 values because we fixed it. So we can now select all, and we're back to how we were before. So that was a little niche usage of filtering. If you have to make sure that your data is very, very clean, you can go through the different columns one by one and make sure that there's no typos. But for columns that have a lot of different values, for example, the cities, there's, 10 actually is not that bad, but let's say product, there's 18 of them. It might become a little bit hard to actually spot these typos like this. So if that works for you, great. If not, don't worry about it. We'll now turn the filter off again. So that's the end of the official outline of the webinar for today. We're going to go through a couple last little bonus
in Excel?
tips before we open the floor to some questions.
Looks like we lost Yakir. Hold on a second. He'll probably try to come back
Okay.
on. Hello?
I think I'm back here. Not sure what happened.
Yeah, we lost you. We lost you.
Okay. Interesting. Let's go back to where you were. So let's jump right back in. So I was saying that there's a need for confidence to learn on your own when it comes to learning Google Sheets or Excel, because Rome was not built in one day, and there's no way to get one course which will teach you everything there is to know. People who learn engineering spend 4 years in university, and then they go out to the field, they work for NASA, and they spend their whole career learning. And Excel, not to intimidate you, but Excel is a little bit like that. You may only end up using 10% of it in your whole career, but it takes time to get there. And you have to be willing to learn bit by bit, and you can't do it all in one shot. If you go to some article online and look up the top 50 functions in Excel and you read them all, it might feel good and feel productive, but I don't think that will help you to actually absorb the content, because you have to apply it in your daily practice. So it's better to learn things more deeply, which is why in this webinar, I showed you how to understand the syntax of a function, the blueprint, and that lets you then figure things out on your own. So that's a first of all, an important tip for your whole learning journey. The idea of best practice, which is a bit of business lingo, is to do something right the first time, right? Do it once, do it right. People, when they start up a new spreadsheet and they want to track something, sales or tasks, they might just do whatever works the fastest to get something out the door. Now, that could be good if your boss is, pushing you and pressuring you and you have to give him some numbers. But in general, if you have a bit of time and you're building something that you want to use in an ongoing way, which is what a lot of spreadsheets are for ongoing usage, then it's good to do things right the first time and you build good habits, right? It's not that difficult to enter the data in as rows and columns properly. But if you start doing formulas all over the place and you put some data here and some data there and you start adding things up on all of a sudden your sheet becomes unusable. And if you've used Excel at work a little bit, you'll know what I'm talking about. These kind of messy, scary spreadsheets that you don't even want to open, or if you touch one thing, everything breaks. So doing things right from the get-go is a very good attitude to build up your usage of Excel and keep yourself confident, because ultimately learning is about confidence and comfortability. And if you lose that, it's going to be hard to go back. So best practice is key in this regard. Where do you go from here, right? We just spent an hour or so learning 5 tips, which they go together in a certain way. They give you some fundamentals, but where do you go from here? So as I always say, understand the principles, right? Whenever you're doing something in Excel, if you look up an answer online, try to understand why it's working the way it's working, as opposed to just doing it, because the more you understand, the more you'll be able to learn. Definitely learn more functions and practice, right? That's the key word, practice. Like I said, just looking at a blog post of the top 50 functions will be nice because you'll feel like you're achieving something, but practicing is the only way to actually get them going. So if your work doesn't require you to use Excel that much, that's okay. That's fine. Just know that without practicing, it's not going to help that much to watch YouTube videos or to attend webinars. Even you have to really put it into practice, because your fingers on the keyboard is what gets you to remember it. And the muscle memory of typing it in 1,000 times again and again is what's going to make you remember it. And you can do the functions in your sleep if you want. Next is to Google every question you have. If you have a question, how do I get the total sales of my column, right? So you wanna know what to do. Literally just Google it. You will find so many answers out there on different forums or on Reddit, or you might even get linked to the documentation of Google Sheets, like I told you, which will have the answer for you right there. Occasionally, your answer will require a few functions in one, which is, again, a little bit advanced, but you can just go bit by bit. The point is that the answers are out there. You don't have to always spend 2 hours on YouTube, but if you want to YouTube things, that's also great. YouTube is good for visual learners. It can show you exactly how to do it, and you can type it properly. Really just Google everything, right? It's your friend. The internet is a vast resource of information, so use it to your own advantage. ChatGPT is something in the last couple of years which has become very prevalent in learning anything, whether it's coding or Excel. I would say use it if you know how to use it, but with caution, because it doesn't always get things correct. Sometimes if you go too deep and you have a long conversation, then the answer that it gives you might not actually exist. That's number one. And number two, the cautionary is about copy and pasting. If you just take the answer that it gives you and just chuck it into your spreadsheet, it might work, but you wouldn't have learned anything. And then you're going to be hamstrung and handcuffed to ChatGPT whenever you want to learn, and you're not going to be able to flourish on your own. And definitely the best learning is going to come from your own ability to use functions yourself. So use it. I use it for coding. I use it day to day, but try and know what it's telling you. Use it as a helper as opposed to a slave, I would say. And lastly, forget the stereotypes. You don't have to be an Excel guy to use Excel. anyone in their job can use it. You can be a cool guy who goes to parties and watches movies, but you can still use Excel if you want. I mean, it's just a very useful business tool. So don't let that get in the way of your learning. Thank you all. Thank you for being here for the last hour and listening to me talk about Excel. It's my big passion. So I'm now going to open the floor up to some Q&A. I first just want to say that I'm not going to go into your specific spreadsheet now live and give you direct tips of how to fix your thing. It's more if you want to ask something on what I just taught you or something that's, you know, a sort of quick minute or so answer, I'm happy to do that. If you want to talk to me after this call, webinar, you can email me there. If you have my number, you can text me. I'm just make a time to talk. I'm not putting it out publicly for obvious reasons, but it's now open. Rody, do you want to see who's asking questions, or someone want to just speak up? I guess I don't really know how to run this.
Yeah, people could just unmute themselves and ask you directly. But first of all, thank you very much. This was excellent. It was meticulously planned and done, you know, very structured and very thoughtfully. And you know, these 5 functions that you spoke about are like the most basic ones, important for everybody to master. So thank you, and the floor is open. I see many messages, people thanking you. But go ahead. If you have a question, just unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay, Ellie.
How do you take a spreadsheet that you have, let's say you have 2 separate spreadsheets and you want to merge them into 2 tabs on one spreadsheet? Yeah.
Okay, so there's a way that you can do copy from one to another. If we go quickly, if you have a tab like this, you can click on the arrow over here and do copy to, and then it will give you the option to copy to a new spreadsheet or to an existing spreadsheet. That's one option, or you can just literally copy and paste, manually copy and paste. That's a good question.
Awesome, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, if you feel that you're comfortable and you've learned what you need to learn, the resources will be out there if you want to watch this again. I will be sending a link through where Rody will help me. We'll send a link out to a Google Classroom, which will have the slideshow, the spreadsheet, and the recording. The recording takes a bit of time to upload. But otherwise, if you're finished with this learning and you have no questions, be my guest to go back to your day job or not. Otherwise, I'll be here for the next 5-10 minutes if anyone has any questions still.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jakob. This was wonderful, and looking forward to continuing with the series.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everyone. It seems no questions, so I think I'll log off now.
Okay.
Great. See you all.
Take care. Thank you. That's